Right, so hello everyone. Um, Thanks for coming. As I say there, you look great. I wrote that before I'd seen you, and it's turned out to be true. So that's a good, decent start for us. So this is me. Hello. Looking more professional than I currently do now, but that's what 2 years of living in your back room will do for you. So my name's Mark. I'm a copywriter. My business is Blossom Tree Copy, and I've been doing this for about 6 years now. So I just wanted to give you a brief overview of who I am and why I'm qualified to give this talk. So I've been self-employed for 6 years, but for 2 years before that, I worked at a couple of agencies in and around Newcastle. And before that, I was a journalism student, and basically I didn't want to go to London and write for free for a while and couch surf, and I didn't want to write about the local football team for the local newspapers. So that dream sort of fell apart a bit, and I decided that I should reuse the writing skills, which were always my focus, in a new direction. So that's why I went into PR and then copywriting after that. Going freelance was a big step, but like I say, it's been 6 years now, and I haven't had to start an OnlyFans or sell farts and jars at this point to keep myself going, keep the mortgage paid. So that's probably a good sign that things are going to be okay. Although having seen the money involved in both of those things, it might be time for a rethink by the time the next talk comes along. So today we're going to be talking about tone of voice. Tone of voice for me is one of the single most important aspects of company communications. It doesn't matter what type of company you are, what size company, it's just supremely important. I mean, I've worked with companies all around the world, Europe, America, and here, small startups to the likes of Tesco supermarkets. And when I'm engaged by them, the first thing I will always ask is, what is their tone of voice? It's just that important. It informs everything that we do. It gives me an idea of what their most important aspects are, what they really want to focus on. And like I say at the bottom there, it's tone of voice it's more than the words that you use, or the words, it's also the words you don't. And it's how to get your ideas across to those markets and those audiences that are the most valuable to you. And that's value in terms of money, but it's also value in terms of brand buy-in, why people would choose to use you rather than anybody else. So it's how you stand out, and it's how you show the world what's most important to you. So it really cannot be overstated. So let's have a little look. This is probably the easiest example of what tone of voice is, from Very British Problems. Removing the kind from kind regards, let the recipient know you're absolutely bloody livid. Please, by the way, excuse my voice. I've developed a bad throat. That's not COVID related. Exactly 2 days before this talk. So I'm also not used to public speaking or doing anything in public for the last 2 years. So yeah. So this is a very simple example of tone of voice, and just how even removing one word has massive implications for what you've written. Say tone of voice is part of everyday life. You might not realize it, you might not notice it, but it is literally everywhere. It is in every piece of brand communication that you see. It's in everybody's values, because it's not just about what's written down on the paper or what's written on screen. The tone of voice also informs the values of the company behind it. And nowhere is that more prevalent, I would argue, than in newspapers. So newspapers in this country are partisan. So they have a side. They are either the left-wing press or the right-wing press. Now, I would like very much for some people to shout out some words that they would associate with the style of the left-wing press. So please feel free to unmute and shout them at me.
Sarcastic.
The left-wing press, was that?
Sorry, left-wing press, yes.
Yes, okay, sarcasm. Anyone for any more?
Blaming.
Blaming, okay. Anyone else?
Passive aggressive.
Passive aggressive, okay.
Really passive aggressive in The Guardian.
So, okay, so I'm going to move on very quickly. So the ones that I've got, which possibly show my bias more than anything else. The left-wing press is more globally focused than the right. It's obviously more liberal because it's on the left and socially progressive. It's seen mostly as being politically correct. It also takes a more removed stance in a lot of cases. So more possibly aloof, but more of a spectator, I would say, and always prides itself on this idea of speaking truth to power. So, who wants to shout some words for the right-wing press? Some very careful, longer than 4 words, please.
Misogynistic.
Racist.
Just good start, yes. And all more than 4 letters, so that's good. Anyone else?
Royalist.
Royalist, yep.
Unburdened by fact.
I mean, that's several words, but I'll let it stand.
Inflammatory.
Inflammatory, yep.
We've got one in the chat, anti-woke.
Yep, that's fair enough. So, yep, so I mean, you've covered a lot of this. Nationalistic, inherently conservative, gleefully politically incorrect, xenophobic, which covered quite a few of the points made there. Empathetic, which might be controversial, but the whole idea of the right wing is, you know, they are on your side, even when they are demonstrably against your interests, they are on your side. And they will make more of an effort to be humorous to kind of prove that fact. Although if anybody saw today's headline about Boris Johnson being crushed ahead and spent a good 10 minutes trying to work out what they were actually trying to say, they might, you know, not necessarily follow that. It's too funny. So some examples, you know, who do you think you are? There's a wordplay pun in there for a start. There's the loaded foreign elite, which brings the xenophobia in, denying the will of Brit voters like you and me and the Sun, whose ownership is Rupert Murdoch, who is a massively loaded foreign elite, versus this example from the left-wing press. It's been a while since I presented this, so I can't remember which paper this is, unfortunately. I apologise for that. So, you know, this is far more removed. The German industry in stark warning to UK over Brexit. You know, it's taking more of a factual approach, and it actually is on the side of these people more than the right-wing press is. Again, secret papers reveal how Middle East peace was lost. It's a story about a foreign country that isn't sensationalized. It's just the facts. Whereas this, yeah, this one by the Mail, just it's hard to think of what to say about this one. You know, we can't throw them out. You can blame human rights again because, you know, what's the point in human rights for humans? Yeah, and obviously that idea of the foreign murderers and rapists, it's the alien, it's presenting all these people in the same boat, even when they're not actually in a boat, which is quite impressive for these newspapers. So yeah, so my point is that each of these papers has their tone of voice, and you know, I could have showed you these headlines and you would have been, you know, you would have got pretty much spot on which newspaper it was because you see them every day. You know those newspapers by that tone of voice. And although we don't, let's not all necessarily like all these newspapers amongst us, we do know what they are and we have that recognition, and that's what we sort of strive for, and that's the power of the tone of voice. So, writing with the tone of voice. I say it's one thing to know what a tone of voice is and to be able to recognize it, but it's another thing entirely to be able to actually write it for your own business. And I'm assuming that's why quite a few people are here today, to sort of get some pointers. So we will come to that. So you all know how to write with a tone of voice. That's the basic angle. that I've got here, everybody writes with a different tone of voice, I would argue, several times a day. So, like you can see from these two prompts here, to invite a friend to the pub as if you were booking a meeting room, and emailing your boss a progress report as if they were your partner. You talk to those people in work and at home in very, 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 very different ways. So what I would like you to do right now is to choose one of those prompts and just to spend a few minutes imagining how you would write that. And then I'm going to pick on some people to read them out. So just take a few minutes. Should have really found the countdown music to play for this.
You could always sing it.
Could, but that wouldn't be very good for my voice. So I'm gonna demur on that one. Give you another minute or so while I refresh myself. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share a second and see everyone's lovely faces. Hello, everyone. I mean, it's mostly everybody's lovely names, but never mind. So does anybody want to volunteer before I just pick people at random?
Oh, we've got one come through on the chat.
Okay, so DX, are you free to come to King's Arms on 30th of January? I will send you an agenda near the time. Excellent. I mean, your friend's going to think you're an absolute tosser if you send them that, aren't they? So that's a very good start. Anybody else, especially one from the other side of things? I'm going to pick a name if I don't get one. Everything's very good. Can we talk later? Yeah, that's always worrying. If you get that message, that's fine. Even if it says everything's fine. I'm going to pick on Icona because I know Icona and I know she'll have done something good. So Icona, if you can hear me, time to chip in.
Sorry, I had to unmute. All right. All right. So this is me inviting a friend over to the pub as if I was booking a room. Dear Mark, I'd be interested in discussing some ideas with you tonight. Would you join me at a pub? And the other one is me emailing my boss as if he were my partner. Hey Dave, check out this report I just completed. I'd love to go over it with you over a drink tonight. Fancy going out with me tonight?
I mean, who could resist, honestly? Well, thanks for that, everyone. I'm going to go back onto the presentation. So there you go. As I say, you all know how to use the tone of voice effectively, and it turns out creepily in some cases. But let's crack on. We seem to have lost the place. Excellent. That's what we want. Right, there we go. Okay, so shout out time. Where should you be using your tone of voice? Give me some examples. Bring them on.
Email newsletters.
Yep, that's a good one. Where else?
Website copy.
Definitely, that keeps me in a job and keeps my dog in treats. My dog will be very happy if you use tone of voice for your website copy. Next.
Social media posts.
Oh, sorry, there's two people there once. I had social media posts, and what was the other one?
Presentations.
Presentations, yep. I mean, this is basically how I talk this presentation, so it's entirely in my tone of voice. Any more for any more?
What about things like call centers, or I don't know, times where people might need to meet customers? Does that apply?
That's an interesting one, because I think tone of voice is more of a sort of broadcast method. I think that would fall into the category of having set sort of behaviours and what's expected from the staff. So that was fall more into a company culture, I would think. But I take your point. So this is actually a trick question, to be honest. I know everyone hates trick questions, but it's important to know that you should use your tone of voice everywhere. There should not be one place in your company's communications that does not match your tone of voice. As you can see from this quote that I thought of whilst watching Bake Off, creating a tone is like baking cake, and consistency is key. If you have a really strong tone of voice on your website copy, and you have an email sign up, and then the newsletter goes out, or your marketing communications go out, and it is totally the opposite of what people have come to expect and come to enjoy from your website or from your social media, it's exceptionally jarring. It really takes people out of that organization. And you've also got to think, if this was the first time somebody came across my company, would it have the same effect as the strong tone of voice would? And it just wouldn't. So it's really massively, massively important that it works across the board. And that goes into internal communications as well, where possible. Obviously, it's a different stakeholders, different audience, but it's the same values and it still stands. So, for social media, your web copy, any flyers you do, any advertising you do, any presentations you do, social media across the organization, across the social media channels. So there is no real reason why your LinkedIn cannot have the same tone of voice as your Twitter. In fact, it'll make LinkedIn a lot more interesting. So yes, everywhere, use your tone of voice everywhere. And a really good hint, so we're getting into the sort of little tips and hints now. So I would always argue on the side of positivity rather than negativity. It just appeals more to people. It's more engaging. You're not going to get very far if you're constantly being negative, and whether that's towards your audience, as we're about to see. I'm not going to be negative towards you. I've got some examples that I haven't made myself. So, I mean, there's some good examples in advertising of people taking pot shots at each other. Burger King recently had an advert on the side of their restaurants that said, well, I think it was, "Why work for a clown when you could work for a king?" And that's pretty funny. But their whole brand identity does not rest on not being McDonald's. So positivity and highlighting the positive aspects is what's going to encourage buy-in. Excuse me. Rather than negativity. And I say, if you're going to be negative most of the time, who's that towards? It's going to be towards the audience. You're going to turn them away. So here's just a couple of examples. This is from Dove. Dove have always been very good on the self-love angle. This was a few years ago now as their self-esteem project. Beauty is a source of confidence, not anxiety. It's very caring. Reach young people with self-esteem education. They've highlighted a big issue that's really been rumbling away for years now, as backlash to the magazine organizations. And they've got a goal there it's very lofty, but it's also very down to earth. The picture also fits to the tone of voice because it's women of all different shapes and sizes. I know I've cut their midriffs off. Apologies for that. So yes, so it's about positive relationships with the way they look, helping young people raise their self-esteem, full potential. It's not quite fluffy, but it's effective, and it gets you thinking about these good angles. Whereas this next piece, I found this on Facebook and proceeded to have, well, I tried to have a civil conversation with the person who posted this, and they weren't having it. So this was from a personal trainer and gym owner. Yeah. So this is basically negging on a social media scale. And he's tried to go for the humor. But to me, there's several spots where that just really misses. Mostly the bit at the bottom where he sort of implies that you should, if you're not terrified that your partner will leave you because you're unfit, then you should be. So he says he helps you achieve confidence, but it's really taking an approach of breaking you down before he can build you up. And to me, that's probably for most people, I would hope that would be quite a turn off against going towards him, because he's making you, he's not talking about the positive aspects that you will have. He's talking about the negatives right now that he will help you move away from, supposedly. Out of interest, does anybody have any strong thoughts on this? Does anybody think the opposite to me? Does anybody think this is nightmarish? Please shout out. Are you all busy doing push-ups? Sorry?
Really, like, not even just the tone of voice, it's so badly presented. All of the capitalization, it's just awful.
There is that as well.
I mean, the tone of voice is horrendous and bullying, but I find it quite hard to take it seriously because he's got capitalization all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, when I basically, I did get in touch with them and say, look, this might be construed this way. And he's obviously written himself. I try not to judge based on capitalization. It obviously shows that he's not got a professional hand in there. But like we say, that the bullying aspect of it kind of breeds into that toxic element of why people find it so hard to start getting fit. Whereas, the Dove example makes me want to use Dove. This does not make me want to go to this person to make sure that my partner thinks I'm fit enough to stay with. So, yeah.
How did you approach him when you got in touch? Did you say how bad his copy was affecting people?
I basically, let's go back. I basically sent a short Facebook message. I can't remember exactly what I said. This was a little while ago, but I basically said that, it's very, very negative and that it could affect people's self-esteem. And he basically called me a wanker and said that he had lots of massive success rates. So I just decided to leave him to it.
Yeah, yeah, move on from him.
Yeah, there's some lost causes, isn't there? I mean, I'm half tempted to write a post in this style about why you need a tone of voice, but that would be far too passive aggressive. I don't have the time for that. So another good tip is to look at your competition. Yeah, I mean, it's not about, I mean, obviously, imitation is a form of flattery. Everybody knows that, supposedly anyway. But this isn't about that necessarily. So you can take aspects of what you like from competition, or even people who aren't competition, other companies, other brands, other industries. Competition is a very good place to start, though. And it can be just as interesting to see what you like about the competition's communications as what you don't like about them and what you think they're doing wrong. So, if you think, oh, I wouldn't be doing that. So if I was a gym owner, I'd be doing the exact opposite of that, what that guy had done, because to me, it didn't work. And I could see areas where it would continue not to work if we continued writing it like that. So it's always good. I mean, you say, look at the competition first, and then broaden your scope. Everybody talks about innocent drinks having an excellent tone of voice, which they do. Far too many people have tried to copy it. That's also true. But there's elements there, and you can see the sort of the playfulness or being unafraid to take risks, and you can take that into your own business. But here's an example for competition to start with. So this is sent to me by Dave Harland, and Dave Harland is also an excellent writer. I say that a bit presumptively, but yes, so he booked a holiday through Thomas Cook, and you know, one thing you don't want to send to somebody like Dave Harland is an exceptionally bland email. And this is what he got. I mean, it's so generic. This really could have been written by a machine. There's nothing interesting about it. There's nothing that makes you excited for your holiday. This is basically just, might as well be a paper receipt. Whereas if you compare this to Canopy and Stars, and for those who don't know, Canopy and Stars do breaks in sort of interesting locales without any light pollution, and often in the likes of shepherd's huts of a varying price range. But this was from my booking, as you can see. But yeah, so you know, they've made the effort to sort of get across their identity and what you expect when you book with them. So they've got the words relaxing, refreshing, you know, inspiring. It just, you know, you can feel the wind in your hair already. You know, feel that lack of electricity. So yeah, and you know, they've passed on to the people who work there. It's, you know, it gives a reassuring sense that everything's in hand, and you are going to have that relaxing, refreshing, inspiring outdoor experience. Because what else would you expect if you book with Canopy and Stars? Whereas, you know, Thomas Cook wouldn't have done them much harm to throw in some, you know, sun, sea and sand, but they couldn't even be bothered to do that. So which one are you going to be more excited for? Or at least when you open the email, it's going to make you smile. It's going to be Canopy and Stars, no matter where you've booked to go with Thomas Cook. So yes, always look at your competition. Yeah, so that's sort of the section of what tone of voice is, and you know, how to write with it. But it can be difficult for people, even people who know they need to have a tone of voice, to actually find that tone of voice. And that's normally, you know, where I come in. But I'm just going to go through a few of the processes that I always use when I'm meeting with a potential client. Excuse me. So this is what I always come up with first. And this is basically what gives me a guide to be able to go away and write in a style that suits them and suits their audiences and positions them the way they want to be. So 3 to 5 words that you think currently describe your business, another 3 to 5 where you think clients and customers would use to describe your business, and a final 3 to 5 words for what you actually want them to start using to associate with your business. And people often go, oh wow, I didn't really think of that, because a lot of the times if this company has just been, you know, if the MD of a startup has been writing the web copy and a few tweets every couple of months, the chances are they've just, you know, they've done it, it's good enough, but they haven't really realized the discrepancy between what they think of the business and what the public thinks of the business. And tone of voice is your way to bridge that gap. It's your way to make sure that the public knows what you're all about, rather than having these different perceptions. You know, you don't want to think of yourself as being, you know, highly reliable and professional, whereas the public thinks your products are flimsy and a bit shit. You know, if that's the case, then you're not communicating correctly and should possibly improve your products. But you know what I mean. So if you're involved in writing your own stuff, this is what I would say this should be the first step each and every time. Because say when I get these lists of words back, it helps me to choose the right tone, the right phrases, the right sentence structure to get that point across. And you know, if you don't want to hire a freelance copywriter, or if you want to give them a bit more background, this is a very, very good place to start. The other thing, and it's going to be some more interaction, is a this not that list. Anybody who is a copywriter, I know there's a couple in the group tonight, will know what a this not that is, but it's basically a 2-part list, and it's the most simple thing that you can come up with to define your company. So, like I said before, you know, you are professional, you're not amateur. So you write those 2 things down: professional, not amateur. You can be fun, not serious. You can be, let's think of some. It's basically playing an opposites game. You're defining what you are exactly, and you're defining what you don't want to be. And that, if you look at that, it'll really guide you. So we're going to have a brief chat. So who wants to give me some this, not that's for McDonald's, first of all? So I can start off. I can say that it's, you know, it's every day. It's not an occasion. Who wants to follow on? You're all thinking about McDonald's, I know that, but please do shout them out. Anyone at all?
It's family. It's not romance.
Yep, that'll do.
It's eat with your hands. It's not white tablecloths.
Yep. I'd say it's laid back. It's
Cheap,
relaxed.
not
You know, it's not
expensive.
stuffy. Cheap, not expensive. Exactly. Say it's relaxed. It's not stuffy. I'd argue it's part of the thing is being noisy and full of life rather than being quiet and reserved. That's the one. Anyone else? There's 2 more of these, so if you don't shout out for this one, you're going to shout out for the next ones. Okay, we'll leave McDonald's, leave the golden arches behind. Sony PlayStation. So I would say, just to kick things off, that Sony PlayStation is high tech. It is not casual, in the same way that Nintendo products might be seen as casual or for all the family. Sony's more high tech. So who wants to give me some for PlayStation? There's a digital tumbleweed going across here. Does anybody need me to explain this more, or is it more of a case of the brand selection?
So we've just had one come through on chat.
Oh.
So we've got Emma saying it's for experts, not amateurs. And Vicky says it's playful, but not silly.
Yep, that's all excellent. Oh, I've lost my place again. There we go. Yep, those 2 are spot on. Yes, I mean, it's PlayStation as well. I would say that they're about the experience. What the opposite to that is, I'm not quite sure, if I'm honest with you. But they are high end. They are, you know, they are not. They're not that casual, low level. They can be serious. I will say that with their own offering. So let's move on one more time. Wilko's. Who wants to give me some thoughts about Wilko's now that we know what we're doing? Okay, well, I would say for a start that Wilko might be cheerful, but it's not cheap. It's everyday, not for good use. It's functional.
So it's a means to end. It's a means to an end rather than a day out.
I mean, I'm loving it.
Like an IKEA. IKEA might be like a day out, you know.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry for your family there. I see what you mean. Yes. Wilko, it's very functional. It's affordable. It's not expensive. It's good quality, if not the best quality, but also not the worst quality. It's in all these things, especially you know, they've got approachable staff. You're not going in to Wilko and being presented with, personal shopper, and all these things feed into those brands. I mean, McDonald's probably, out of these ones, you see it across all their marketing and advertising more than anything else. I mean, it's all presented as being very friendly, as a place for gathering, as a place for friends, quick and easy food. That's good quality according to the adverts, but variable in real life. So that tone of voice seeps into everything McDonald's does. So thank you for that, for everybody who shouted out. So we are actually coming to the end. So these are just some top tips. Don't overcomplicate things. I mean, obviously, if you are a B2B tech firm, then there has to be a certain amount of complication in there. There just does. But if you are St. Lawrence Church in Reading, you do not need to have written living to see non-churched young people come to faith and creating new forms of church with them. What? Yeah, I mean, that could be what, helping young people find the church. Could have boiled down. That does not need to be that complicated. So always keep in mind, what would the normal person think? I mean, if before anything goes live, give it to your friends and family, just anybody who's not involved in your sphere, and just make sure that you don't end up with that. Again, jargon sparingly. Sometimes people think that everything has to be written in a certain way. I mean, I mentioned LinkedIn earlier, and I would bet a lot of money that the majority of LinkedIn users write in a far more formal style than they do anywhere else on social media. So this bit of copy here is a good example of jargon that just did not need to be used. So our vision is to build total brand value by innovating to deliver consumer value and customer leadership faster, better and more completely than our competition, which is supported by two fundamental principles that provide the foundation of all our activities: organizational excellence and core values. Would anybody like to venture a guess as to what industry, or if they're feeling brave, company wrote this and used this? Because I do have the answer on the next slide, but I would very much like to hear what people think the industry is, at least for this. Anyone feeling brave?
I mean, it could literally be anything.
Okay, well, anybody who gave the answer as Gillette can give themselves a pat on the back. I like to say that could have been anything, could have been from anyone. It has nothing to do with what anybody's expectations of Gillette products are. And their advertising is fairly strong. They get it wrong sometimes in some people's eyes. They had a campaign a couple of years ago which not everybody liked. But if you read that as everybody did, nobody's going to know what you're on about or who you are, and everybody's going to have sunken into a stupor by at least the second line, as I'm assuming everybody did by that massive gasping silence. So I think this might actually be the last one. Don't be boring. Just try something different. It's not going to be the end of the world if it doesn't take off. If you are a company that's traditionally more formal, then try to lighten it up. Try to engage more. It's not going to have horrendous repercussions if it doesn't take off. And the other thing to go for me, which I always tell people, and people always go, "Oh yeah, I should have thought of that." Look through for the sort of placeholder phrases that everybody uses, and I've got the example here of our friendly and helpful staff. How many times do you read about friendly and helpful staff on people's websites? I know I read it a lot, and I always think the same thing. Like, of course, your staff are friendly and helpful. You're not going to advertise the fact that they're surly and rude. Our surly and rude staff will get back to you as soon as they can be bothered. It's not expected. It's not what happens. Nobody would expect that from a company. So why write it? It doesn't need to be there. You know, if you've got actual positive attributes that fall outside what is normally expected, where you go above and beyond, write that. If not, jazz it up, make it interesting, make people want to talk to your stuff, not just because they're expecting them to be friendly and helpful and deathly dull. And just, you know, experiment, find what works, engage, and, you know, ask for advice, engage other people, and just come up with something that's uniquely you. And that is what will stick in people's minds. I absolutely guarantee it. So there we go. That is the end of the presentation side. Decent time. So I'm going to close this down, and we can ask any questions, or we can fill the time with interpretive dance. It's entirely up to you. So I'm going to stop the share now, and yeah, ask away.